Hello and welcome back to HEMA Fight Breakdowns. Today we're going to be talking about Zeke Rozell. Now, Zeke is a relatively newer fighter. It looks like he's only been competing in tournaments for the last year or two, but has done pretty well for himself with a particular style that I would call very aggressive and bind heavy. And it's not all the time that you see a style like this work very well, particularly because it is one that relies heavily on the feeling or the foolin and the ability to make a decision tree based on an initial bind and an initial contact with the blades that people generally take a much longer time to get used to. So we're going to start with Zuffectin, and Zuffectin, as always, is all about the footwork and the setup and the method that is used to get the best techniques going and get into the flow chart that allows for success. And in Zeke's case, that involves two distinct things: one, linear explosive forward footwork, and onsets and set-offs with basic hand positioning. So if we go back and we watch this exchange, one thing you'll notice is this lunge. Now, this is a deep, forward, well-extended lunge that ensures that his opponents are always either coming at him and, getting bound up in whatever's going on, or taking a step back. And that is a key feature to this sort of setup, because long, extended, and very well structured attacks from here are what he uses to set up his onsets and stabs and his kind of like Zornort sort of deals. And most importantly, to keep his opponents in the defensive mindset necessary to then build off of that onsets and to throw feints and hand shots. So as we see here, we see a classic example of what I mean by this kind of Zornhau. So from where we start, there is a big, deep lunge with the right foot the entire time that engages with a bind up here and high. And the reason this is happening is to force one of two things: either the opponent to try to attack in turn, in which case they would likely be struck at the same time, or for them to throw up this wall parry. And in the case of throwing up these wall parries, one of two things is going to happen. Either they're successful, as they are here, in warding off the attack, but can't really throw a response too easily, after that happens. Or, as we'll see in other examples, the purpose of this kind of attack is to collapse the structure of the opponent just enough so that that tip can get online and a thrust can follow it up. And this kind of footwork is very useful for that, not only in the fact that there's a big explosive forward lunge, but the fact that with the right foot forward, there is a choice the second this lands to either push back with the front leg and try to exit distance if it's unsuccessful, or to try to follow it up with a passing step on the left leg if some extra momentum and extra distance is needed to close in order to land that stab. So if you have somebody who goes really, really far back every time you come forward, what you can do is simply step forward with this left foot and basically walk them down with the point forward. Because once you have that structure collapsed and you have, the parry on the wall of the sword off to the side in a position where this shoulder is now open as a target, you can basically just continue to advance your threat forward until the other person deals with it. So with this clip, we see Zeke using his, I think, most preferred technique, which is the onsets and stab, and specifically doing so in a method that has a superior bind right at the point of contact in the initial bind. So if we go back and we watch this, you see that right here, he's performing something like a lunge, but more importantly, look at where the bind is here. This is the middle of Zeke's sword and just about the tip of his opponent's. And what that means is that when you aggressively sort of beat into a bind like that, two things happens. One, any lateral movement, even a very little bit, is going to ever so slightly displace your opponent's tip based on how far up their sword you are. If you beat someone's blade way down here at the bottom, it's not going to go anywhere. But if you beat it all the way up here at the top, it's going to go pretty far. So a tiny little bit of lateral movement combined with a good extension from the arms and a zoning with the rotation of the left hand allows you to get your point deeply on target and get your opponents way off to the side, despite the fact that both people, almost at the exact same time, were intentionally trying to thrust each other. And this kind of onsetsen is a great methodology for dealing with people who will always try to meet your plow with their own plow. and in a basic method of keeping you at a distance and making sure that you're playing a thrust game. A lot of people do not respect enough the onsets and straight in stab because a lot of people have trouble making it work without it being so risky as to get doubled. And there is certainly a risk of doubling in these situations. But what you have to do and what you have to keep in mind is that if you don't want to be doubled in a stab v stab scenario, your safety comes entirely from the bind as it exists when the blades first meet, and a little bit of extra beat or push to the side that you can add to that is going to take you from pretty safe to very safe. So another rule of thumb whenever you have a style is having multiple attacks and multiple feints that all run off of the exact same setup. So in this exchange, you're going to see a thrust and then a feinted thrust and a hand cut. But the reason that the hand cut is so successful in this way, one, is based on the initial thrust, which as we found out now, Zeke is a big fan of. And opponents that he's been facing now are clearly trying to deal with that. But if you watch carefully, in the second exchange, you see a similar setup where Zeke will sort of pull his sword high. And as you see, the previous thrust has gotten everybody wary of this footwork and this forward motion to assume that an attack is coming. And when that happens, they go up into Kron. And the reason they're going up into Kron is one, that this thrust forward style has gotten a lot of his opponents to go into a plow v plow scenario. Because as you know, plow v plow is the best position to be in for dealing with another person's thrust. Both your swords are out and the tips can more, meaningfully bind and engage with each other. If someone's stabbing the crap out of you, your response is not going to be to take your hands and put them into Vom Tog, where you have to cross your entire body line just to cover your torso from getting stabbed. So going into plow v plow is what everyone is doing to try to adapt to the thrust that they're seeing. And in that, this feinted hand cut is a great method of dealing with that adaptation because it puts your opponents in a position where, one, they've pre-programmed themselves to wait for an attack from you, and then they're waiting to throw up that Kron parry because they feel like that's the safest. And if you can just get them to pick the wrong side, either with a thrust feint or with a cut feint, you're going to get them to open up their hands on another side. And most importantly, you can throw hand cuts from a long distance that you get to establish by threatening people first with thrusts. So thrusts are long distance techniques. You get people on the outside, you get them playing that outside game, and then you punish them for their defensiveness and for their block first mentality by attacking them in a place that they must open up in order to parry the thrust that they're most scared of. All right, that's going to be it for today. If you'd like to see your own footage featured on the channel, feel free to send an email with the footage over to HEMAFightBreakdowns@gmail.com, and I hope to see you next time.